What is up, everyone? Welcome back to Chalk Talk Nation. Rob Rundle joining me, as always, Noah Gayhart. And today we are breaking down the American League Central Division. It's going to be interesting this year. Noah and I are going to give our thoughts and opinions. But a lot of injuries have surfaced so far in spring training, and we've gotten some news across Major League Baseball. But before we dive into that, I want to let everyone know that we are still doing our podcasts every Sunday night at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And our podcasts are live on all platforms: Apple Music, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, you name it, we got it, Spotify. So, and visit our website at chalktalknation.com. It'll be good. And Noah also writes for Diamond Digest. He writes for the Cincinnati Reds, his favorite team. And it's really good content. So be on the lookout for that. And Noah, do you just want to start out with injuries, what we got so far?
Yeah, so I would say that the biggest injury news that's come out this week is that Luis Severino is going to need Tommy John surgery. I feel like this is a huge loss for the Yankees. Obviously they got Garrett Cole, and that kind of helps balance out the situation. But Severino's going to miss all this year. Paxton's going to miss the first few months, and so I guess they're just kind of putting more and more pressure on the offense.
Yeah, definitely putting more pressure on the offense. But one thing that I saw was Jonathan Loaziga. I hope I said that right.
Loaziga.
Gosh, I always say that name wrong. But he has looked pretty sharp so far in his couple appearances for the Yankees, and that could be nice for them. Big nice, as our friend Brady Peterson likes to say. But yeah, man, injuries are not fun at all. And Paxton, he's had back issues in the past and arm issues. So hopefully they'll be able to come back soon. What else you got?
Yeah, so keeping with the Yankees, and now on the offensive side, Aaron Judge, his shoulder issues. These are something that's been known, but they're still kind of, the timetable is getting pushed back, and now we're looking at, is he going to be ready for opening day? I think he's supposed to start taking swings maybe sometime in the next week or two, but he's going to be cutting it close, and it kind of feels like we're going to be repeating last year, where the Yankees are just injured all the time.
And it's crazy because these guys are getting paid tons of money, and in baseball, that money's guaranteed. Example A, Bobby Bonilla. Looking forward to that day in July. Anyway, but also Giancarlo Stanton. That news broke too. So those are your corner outfielders right there. And they're lucky they even got Brett Gardner back for a year deal. Brett Gardner is definitely going to be put to use right away once again. And he should perform. He'll do okay, I think. But, I mean, you also have Aaron Hicks still out, right? Aaron Hicks is still out.
Right. Yeah, he's going to miss a good bit of the season as well.
Their entire starting outfield is hurt. It's dangerous to think how a New York Yankees team, how strong they could be if they had those three guys. They could probably win 110 ball games. I mean, just think of the offensive
they're
production.
insane for sure.
So, but Mike Tauchman, he was pretty nice last year. I think he'll have to fit right in. He'll have to go to right field or something like that. And Andujar, which is good, he could slide in that designated hitter role because Urshela went on a tear. So that does kind of fit nicely. That's one thing I'm worried though about is Miguel Andujar with his labrum still. You just want to be very careful because the same thing happened to Ryan Ludwig when he was with the Reds. Sliding to third base, and that could happen at any point. You could be diving for a baseball. If you're at third, or it's terrifying. But I think the Yankees will still be fine. That's for sure. And they still have Clint Frazier too. We forgot to mention him. Yeah, Clint Frazier
just the guy that OPS like 850 in his major league plate appearances last year, and they're just like, oh, we can just send you down because we just have that much of a luxury that we don't even need you, even though you're OPSing like 850.
Dude, I remember.
Hold on.
I remember last year, dude. He was like, he did an interview, and he was literally just like dumbfounded, like in shock, because he knew what the Yankees were doing. It's like, just trade me, because he could literally start for any other outfield. But continue though. Sorry.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no. So just kind of moving on to a couple other names. So Andrew McCutchen, a guy that we highlighted a few weeks ago on the AL or on the NL East preview. He's still going to be missing time here at the beginning of the year. He's coming back towards ACL last year, and so he's going to have to miss time at the beginning of the year. Another guy that we had mentioned a lot the first couple of podcasts we were talking about free agents is Colin McHugh. And we're kind of talking about, when's this guy going to sign? And so he's finally been cleared to start throwing here in the past couple of days. And so hopefully he comes back healthy and doesn't have any issues come up when he starts throwing, because he could be a pretty good piece for a bullpen. And then the
Mm-hmm.
last guy I'll mention, and then we'll get your thoughts on any of these guys, is Griffin Canning, starting pitcher for the Angels. He's a second round draft pick for them a few years ago. Made his rookie debut last year. Struggled a little bit, but he's a guy that they kind of thought that was going to be at the back of their rotation. At least for the beginning of this year, and maybe he moves up if he performs. But he's having some elbow ligament issues, and they're not exactly sure how long that's going to take. It could end up being something that's going to go to Tommy John. So I don't know. How do you feel about any of those injuries? Do any of them pique your interest?
The Griffin Canning one does for sure. His 2020 projections. I mean, he's only 24 years old. But I mean, he was projected to toss 103 innings, which is pretty decent, 110 strikeouts, and a 1.24 WHIP. And in 2019 he had an elevated ERA, but his WHIP was good. He had a 1.21 WHIP, very, very good, especially out there in the AL West where we know certain teams were hitting the ball very well. You can't go wrong there. But you hate to see, especially in the younger players that just start to come up and break into Major League Baseball, have to deal with these arm issues. Freaking dude, did you see that?
Yeah, was that like a stink bunk?
It
It,
was,
looked like there was something on your mic.
dude,
But,
it was a stink bug. Oh my gosh, man. Oh,
right.
I cannot.
A special
Anyway,
guest on today's podcast, the
yes,
stink bug. So
special guest today. Special guest. Oh my goodness. But yeah, so I was sidetracked. Who else were we talking about? Griffin Canning and who else?
Colin McHugh and Andrew McCutcheon.
Colin McHugh. Yeah, Colin McHugh. So around this time last year, this is when Bryce signed, and we know Bryce had, I think, maybe one injury, significant injury in his career so far. I still think it's going to be at least 2 weeks or so, because in 2 weeks is when these teams are really going to start to break down towards that 40-man roster. When they start to really see and nitpick what they need, I think that's when we're going to see a Colin McHugh signing. I think he will be on a Major League Ball club by opening day. I don't think we're going to see a Craig Kimbrell or Dallas Keuchel situation, and he is going to be a huge impact right away. So it'll be good for a certain team. I think the Braves would be a good fit for him. And the good news is, for any team that does go out and get him, they could get him for cheap, like cheaper than what they could have. It's just like it's like a pre-owned car. The face value starts to depreciate after a certain amount of time. So I think they could snag him up for, I think 2 years would be a good start for sure for any team. And then with Andrew McCutcheon, it sucks. We do know that Adam Hazley's going to be okay. It was just a concussion, like protocol or something like that.
Yep.
So he'll be okay. Harper's going to be out there. It's going to be interesting to see how they intertwine Odubel Herrera, because he was this big prospect coming up through their organization. Hasn't been there offensively, but defensively, he's still pretty good. So I don't know. What are your takes?
Yeah, I would be surprised if Odubel Herrera is on the roster at any point this year.
Yeah.
He got DFA'd towards the beginning of the offseason. It came out, I believe it was him that was having some sort of domestic violence case against him. I don't know.
That's right. Yep.
If we ever heard whether that got resolved or whatever, but because I know that they took him off the 40-man roster because of that, and so I would be more. I think it'd be more likely to see a guy like Scott Kingery maybe slide out to an outfield spot than it would be for them to put him back on the 40-man roster and then put him in the outfield.
That would be a very good idea, and try that in spring training. Now that you know that McCutcheon's not going to be ready, put Kingery out there. He's a guy just like Brock Holt. You can platoon him anywhere, and offensively, he's going to give you those numbers. That wouldn't be a bad idea, maybe in left field, because he doesn't have the strongest arm per se, but defensively at those other positions, he's well molded. So that wouldn't be a bad idea for sure. Yeah.
Yep. So moving on from the injuries a little bit, let's go to I think the guy that's been the biggest spring training standout so far, and that would be Chris Davis, and not Chris Davis with a K, but Chris Davis with a C. So far in 7 at-bats, 11 plate appearances, he's hitting .714 with a .818 on-base percentage and a .2000 slugging percentage.
Dude, that's
to go along with 3 home runs and 4 walks. Now, obviously, spring training's only been a week so far, but, with a guy like Chris Davis that struggled the past few years, I think just even just starting out strong like this, I think it bodes well for him because you're going to start to build up that confidence while you start going into the season. I think for a guy like Davis, the past couple of years, it gets to the point where everyone expects you to suck. Everybody talks about how bad you suck, and then you go out there, and because of that, you're hanging your head, and you're just just not in the right state of mind.
No, you're
But
absolutely right. And
yeah, how do you feel about that?
no, you're absolutely right. And he even said it to himself, he's just getting inside of his head. I think it was the start of last year. He started out once again like 0 for 25, 0 for 26, and he got a first hit, and he was like asking for the ball, like jokingly, because he knows how much. I think when you embrace it and and that's going to be a lot of pressure too, because there's a high monetary value on this man.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really kind of putting a damper on the Orioles organization being able to get back to that competitive edge like they were in 2014, when they were winning 90 ball games and they were close to winning the division. And just like Chris Sale said with his season from last year with the Red Sox, how much worse could it get? And the answer is it couldn't get much worse at all. I mean, last year, Chris Davis, in 105 games, he hit a .179. That's 21 points below the Mendoza line. I mean, that is so far below average. Any other man in the league would definitely get sent down or DFA'd. But since he's holding that heavy contract, it's a glass ceiling for the Orioles. They see where they need to be, but they can't get there. And so you might as well play him. You got to play him. There's no sense of just benching him and then just him collecting that money. It's not fair as it is, but 326 slugging percentage, which is crazy because, this is a guy in 2013, or is it 2012? When did Miggy win the Triple Crown? It had to be 2012. I think it was 2012. 2012 when Miggy was going for the Triple Crown. Him and Chris Davis were battling for a home run lead, like 50-some home runs. And Chris Davis was still, every year going after that. You look at his home run numbers. Or no, I'm sorry, it was 2013, excuse me. 2013, he hit 53 bombs. 2014, 26. 2015, 47. 2016, 38. And his last good season was 2015, hitting 262. And I think this is going to be a resurgence for him. He's only 33 still. And they could put him in that designated hitter role to have him focus just solely on hitting. But yeah, it couldn't get much worse. And hitting 714 in spring training, a 2.818 OPS is insane. It's not a good sample size at all. But having 5 hits and 7 at-bats, that's huge, especially for his confidence. And especially 3 of those 5 hits being home runs. He might have his swagger back a little bit, So I kind of like what I'm seeing from the guy. I'm liking it, for sure.
Yeah, so with that idea in mind, I went ahead and I picked out 5 names for you, and I wanted to get your thoughts as to whether you thought that these guys could make a good comeback this year. So these are all guys that, for the most part, with one exception, are guys that are all like getting into the later periods of their career. Okay. And so we already got your thoughts on Chris Davis. Yep. So we'll move on from that. And the 4 guys that I have on this list are Buster Posey, Robinson Cano, Joey Votto. And I had to put this on for you because I wanted to ask, do you think Chris Davis is going to hit 247 again?
Oh, man. That's hilarious. Okay, so let's start with my good old friend Buster Posey, who everyone in Cincinnati highly despises. After that 2012 Game 5 and the NLDS hit that grand slam off Latos. Yep. Sorry to open salt to the wounds for all you Reds fans. We could have been World Series champions. Dang it. No, Buster Posey, he came into the league quickly in 2010, and he had so much swagger, and not only was he stout defensively, but offensively he could produce as well. And he has tapered off quite a bit. But, at this point of his career, I'm surprised he hasn't been moved to first base, if I'm being completely honest. Brandon Belt still is another guy that hasn't really produced that much. And it's crazy to think, San Francisco Giants, you think about, wow, they actually won. I think they were tied. No, I think they did. They won the most World Series in this last decade. They won 3.
Yeah, I think so.
Which is insane. But they made 4 World Series appearances. That just doesn't happen overnight and everything like that. And you have players like Buster Posey, Brandon Belt that were a part of that. And you bring back Hunter Pence. It could be a team chemistry thing, but I think Buster Posey, I think he's going to give you league average hitting, maybe, just for average-wise. His slugging percentage is not the same, and it's not going to be anything of what it used to be. I think he'll be an OPS player, maybe like 710, 720 at best.
Mhm.
If he's gonna get there anyway, it's gonna be with batting average. But defensively, with Posey, he's not necessarily horrible, but runners. Major League Baseball has gone away from stolen bases, and for people to still be stealing bases like they are off of him right now, it's just kind of worrisome, especially when you have
Mhm.
Joey Bart coming up through the organization, who might get that call up this year because the Giants are probably not going to be in the playoff hunt. So with that in his mind, maybe he'll take that, with a grain of salt. But I don't think he's going to produce godly numbers or just be like eye opening. No, I don't. What about you? We'll go
Yeah,
each
I'm
player.
not really do what?
I said we'll go each player.
Okay, yeah. So I'm not necessarily sold on Buster Posey either. I wouldn't surprise me, especially if Joey Bart comes out in spring training or in the first month or two in the minors, if Posey does start to shift to first base a little bit. I think I could see a scenario where maybe Buster Posey and Joey Bart kind of platoon behind the plate, and then on days where Buster Posey is or when Joey Bart starts behind the plate, then Buster Posey shifts over to first base, and those are the days where you give Brandon Belt the day off. Because I would imagine that if you're going to do a platoon like that, Joey Bart probably starts against lefties, and so then you take the lefty bat and Brandon Belt out of the lineup. So I think that makes the most sense. Yeah, I'm not necessarily sold on Buster Posey making a huge comeback this year either. But I mean, I guess you never know. But with the Giants being out of it, I don't think it's going to be a huge impact either way.
Right. And this might be different if they had better pieces to the team. If they had the early 2010s, which is weird to say, of Evan Longoria. These are all guys, you look at the names that are still there. Yeah, 8 years ago you're talking World
Hmm.
Series champions. And now,
Right.
they're just well past their prime. And you hate to say it, but it's true. So, next guy I guess is Robinson Cano. I
Yep.
think I think Robinson Cano. Now, this is a guy who I think will be eye opening this year. Second year with the Mets, because last year he only played in 107 games, but the slugging was somewhat there. 428, 13 bombs, 28 doubles. The average not bad for his age, 37, hitting 256. It's league average. Defensively though, that's where it hurts. I think because you can't DH him. It is the National League team. He's not. He does not have good mobility and stuff like that. And if he uses steroids again or performance enhancing drugs, it's not going to look good for him. He probably will get his third strike. But offensively, I think he actually might be eye opening, because now you start to have a little bit of swagger. Your pitching staff solidified. You have a young core in the infield as well. Because, there's a couple guys in there that I really like. Pete Alonso is nice. Michael Conforto is still nice too. I don't know. There's just some good pieces to that puzzle. So I think he could be eye opening. Batting average, he's not going to hit more than 260, 265. But I think you're going to see maybe a little bit more doubles and stuff like that. And yeah, his batting war is going to go up for sure, I think. What about you?
Yeah, I kind of disagree with you. I think Robinson Cano is kind of getting to that point where, he's a guy that his swing was kind of built to hit the long ball. I mean, and the problem with that is that he's now playing for the New York Mets, and their stadium is massive, and it's hard to hit the ball out there
Way different than
unless your
Yankee
name's Pete
Stadium,
Alonso.
that's for sure. Yeah.
Right? Yeah, you don't have that nice short porch down the right field line where it's like
314.
305 or
Oh
something
my
like that.
gosh.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
Just yeah, and so and part of that is that I think that he probably knows that himself. I mean, we saw him he got suspended for using PEDs, and like,
Hmm.
I doubt a player would use them unless he thinks he needs them. And
Yeah.
you know, and the other thing, and you mentioned this a little bit with the defense, is that he plays subpar defense at second base, and where else are you going to put him? You can't really slide him to first base,
He
which is
played
what a
first
lot of
base for the
teams do with older
Mariners
guys.
for the
Right, and
last
but the
part.
problem with that is that the Mets have rookie of the year Pete Alonso, so it's not like
Yeah.
you can slide him over there, and so I don't know. I don't see the increase in batting more like you do, and I'm definitely not sold on the defense. And so for that reason, I think Robinson Cano continues to decline.
So Buster Posey, both knows. Robinson Cano, yes for me, no for you. Mine's offensively, yours is just all around. So now let's talk about Joseph Daniel Votto. And it's crazy that I think he's even on this list because, and people hate on Joey Votto, and it actually drives me nuts because Joey Votto is probably this is hard, like a hot take, but I think he's the best first baseman in Reds history. I mean, it's kind of you put him right there with Tony Perez, but you look at the things Joey Votto has done. I mean, he is a walking machine, OBP, God, if you want to say, in 2018, 2017, 2016, his OBP was over 400. That's insane. That's absolutely insane. He's the OBP. His career OBP is 421. Okay, let's not go away from that. His career batting average is 307. So everyone out there saying, "Oh, Joey Votto is just he's changing everything. It's too much," because he went through this weird phase. I don't know if it was last year or 2018, where like he changed his batting stance and did these weird swings, like what I'm talking about, like his
Yeah, it was the
weird.
beginning. It was the first half of the 2019 season where he was really trying to mess with his swing a little bit, and he choked up, was kind of getting a little bit lower in the box. And I think we saw like a huge decrease in his power numbers.
Yeah,
And then, and I'll kind of build off that with saying he switched his swing around the halfway through point of the season. And then once he did that, he was starting to hit, he's hitting some home runs. He was hitting for power. That average started to uptick up and his exit velocity went way up. And so, I mean, at least for me personally, I think that's a really good sign coming into this season. And then, part of the problem last season too was he was taking a lot of called third strikes. And I don't
being
know
too
if maybe
patient.
just yeah, and Vada's always been a guy that's been known for his patience, and part of that is because he got some really bad calls against him last year as far as the umpiring is gone. But you got to have a good sense of the strike zone, and who knows what it's worth at this point. But in spring training, in a game the other day, he had 3 at bats and walked in all 3 plate appearances, and I think he's up to 5 or 6 for spring training already, which I would say is probably a good sign that at least he's commanding the strike zone a little bit better than what he did last year.
Yeah, and with Joey Votto too, and I think I don't know who he talked to, but he said he just feels like he has a good feeling just about the Reds this year. You got Mike Moustakas, Eugenio Suarez, Jose Garcia, who's been going off for the Reds in spring training. Hey, this could be good news for the Reds. Maybe after was it the 2-week mark, you call Jose Garcia up maybe if he keeps doing his thing. But they still got Freddie Galvis. Just a bunch of team chemistry guys. Derek Dietrich, Lorenzen. You could just go on and on. This is probably one of the best clubhouse teams in Major League Baseball, just personality wise. All these guys and stuff like that. And Joey has always put up numbers offensively, hitting wise. And people say, well, if you don't hit home runs, I don't like you. If you don't hit doubles, and that's just where the younger generation doesn't appreciate it as much. Because you do have purists, like yourself. I know you are and stuff like that at your age and stuff. And but I think Joey Votto, I think he's gonna have some of his power back. I don't think he's gonna crush 36 home runs like he did in 2017. But you might see 23, 25, which I think would be pretty good for 36-year-old first baseman. And if he can mirror that, he's gonna have other guys to to kind of be competitive with. And also, I think you're going to see his RBI numbers go up as well. And we know RBIs aren't necessarily that important, but hey, it's going to help the Reds win games. And I think Joey Votto is definitely going to do that because the Reds, they're going to be a playoff team this year. I have a feeling. It's an unbiased opinion. So I definitely think Joey Votto will be eye-opening this year for sure.
Yeah, I do too. And the one other thing that you kind of got into, and I think is worth mentioning, is that the past couple of years, like all eyes have been on Votto, with maybe a little bit of exception last year when Suarez really took a huge step forward. But for the longest time, it's been like, hey, Joey Votto's the guy, and we need him to produce, and it's all on his shoulders. But you look at what we did this offseason. You went out and you got Mike Moustakas. You went out and got Nick Castellanos. That's like another combined like 60 home runs right there.
Yeah,
They went out and got offensive pieces this year. And so I think that takes a little bit of the pressure off of Votto having to be the sole producer for this team. And so I think if you take that pressure off of him, it becomes more of a team effort. Yeah, Votto doesn't have to go out and hit 35 home runs this year. He can hit 20 to 25 and just if he gets on base like what he used to do, like if he can get his on base up over 380 or maybe even 400 because it's Joey Votto and that's just kind of what he does, then I think that this would be huge for the Reds.
absolutely.
So with that in mind, we don't have to talk about this guy a ton, but I just want to know, do you think he's going to hit 247? For those of you who don't know, we're talking about Chris Davis of the Athletics, not like the Orioles who we talked about earlier. He had a pretty good streak. I'm not sure. Do you know how many seasons in a row it was
Five.
where he hit 247?
It was 5. It was from 2015 to 2018. Hit 247. It's so crazy. I mean, it's just such a random number. It's right below average. And as an Athletics fan, you want your team to do well and everything, but like I just I just want Chris Davis. I just want Chris Davis to hit 247. I just think it's so cool how it happens. I mean, you have to think the technicality of baseball and lining up the hits with your at bats. I mean, because it fluctuates every year, but still being able to do that is very impressive. Last year, not so much. He only hit 220, but the only thing I love Chris Davis to death. The only thing I don't like, he's a free swinger. He swings at literally everything. He hardly walks, so that's why his OPS hurts. But his slugging percentage has always been very good. You look at the numbers from 2018, 549 slugging, 2017, 528, 2016, 524. Like 5 consecutive seasons, basically, of over 500 slugging percentage. Like, you can't ask for much more, especially in a pitcher-friendly ballpark, where you play 81 games a year. It's pretty nice to see, and this is his last year in Oakland under contract. So, he's going to want to do well and stuff like that. Oakland probably won't be a team to ship, per se, because they're going to be probably making a playoff push this year as well. But,
right.
You still never know. You know what I mean? So, I don't think it's going to be as eye-opening as Joey Votto. And I don't even know if you can really consider it eye-opening because everyone just expects him to hit 247.
Right.
So I'll just say it's like not going to be eye-opening, but it's not going to be like he's just awful like last year. I don't know. If you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I'll just to sum up my views on it in like a sentence or two, I think it's going to be eye-opening, and the reason I think it's going to be eye-opening is because I think he's just going to go ahead and hit 247 again, and people are just going to be like, it's impressive at this point.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. But he did lead Major League Baseball in home runs in 2018 with 48. So, hey, especially he could beat up on the Mariners a little bit, the Rangers pitching staff. I mean, he'll have to face Kluber, but the rest of their pitching staff isn't that great. So you could beat up on these pitchers quite a bit. So it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, so those are the 5 players, I guess, that you said, if they could be eye-opening or not. Is there anything else, or should we dive into?
Let's get into the AL Central.
All right. Well, our first team that we are going to talk about is talk about eye-opening. What a great transition. Could be the Chicago White Sox. The Chicago White Sox have made a lot of moves. Here's just 3 right off the bat. Yasmani Grandal, Nomar Mazara, Dallas Keuchel. Just those 3 names alone. You could have, okay, yeah, that's a very good offseason. Nope, they didn't stop there. They got Gio Gonzalez, who, yes, he's been battling with shoulder issues, but he's an average pitcher, but he'll get the job done. You got him, Edwin Encarnacion, slugged 34 home runs last year. 123 OPS plus. This guy's in his late 30s. You can't ask for much more. Steve Cishek, yet again, 64 innings pitched, 2.95 ERA to join a very solidified bullpen. And the biggest thing about this is that they didn't really lose anybody whatsoever. So, Noah, what are your takes on the Chicago White Sox this offseason?
Yeah, so I mean, I love the Yasmani Grandal move. I mean, 4 years, $73 million. It's a lot of money just for it being a catcher. But I mean, when you really look at it, like it's not that much money in terms of just like an overall player paying for what he's actually worth. So 119 OPS plus last season, 28 home runs, 246 batting average is a little low, but then he had a 380 OBP. So he gets on base in other ways other than just by hitting.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that's huge is that he's one of the best pitch framers in baseball. And when you look at the White Sox starting rotation, obviously they added Dallas Keuchel and Gio Gonzalez, but Lucas Giolito, Dylan Cease, they're going to have Michael Kopech at some point when he gets back and is healthy. They've got a lot of young arms. And when you can have a guy like Yasmani Grandal behind the plate that can kind of frame and help make them look a little bit better, then that's going to help build their confidence and ultimately lead to them probably being better players. And so I love this for them. How do you feel about it?
I love it too. The only thing I'm kind of surprised that the White Sox didn't do was trade James McCann, because James McCann had a very good year last year. And when you bring in a guy like Yasmani Grandal, you're going to get the defense. Not amazing defense per se, but you're going to get good defense and you're going to get even better hitting. And we know catching is that position really hurts for hitting and slugging percentage.
Yeah.
And James McCann, just after last season alone, with his career, it's not a great sample size, but for 1 year alone, you could definitely get some prospects out of him. But having him as well as Yasmani Grandal, I don't think people understand how dangerous that is, because now you have a guy, you could play half a game. You could start with James McCann, let Yasmani Grandal rest for a little bit if you need to, even if it's a full game. You could DH. There's so much mobility in this lineup. It is going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. But that's the one thing I took away from the White Sox for sure.
Yeah, and on top of having James McCann, they also have former top prospect Zach Collins, who's a catching guy. The defense is pretty lackluster. He might have to move to first base or DH at some point in the future, but he's a guy with a lot of power too. And so with that, at the end of the trade deadline, they could come down to it and just go, yeah, we think we can be competitive. Maybe they ship off one of those two guys and get something back for him. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see, as the season goes on. Looking at the other two hitters that they acquired, how do you feel about Nomar Mazara, and Edwin Encarnacion?
Edwin Encarnacion is a very surprising player in my opinion, still being able to produce decent numbers, because he went on a tear with the Blue Jays, and when he was in Seattle, his numbers kind of dipped a little bit. And then when he went to New York, kind of revamped himself a little bit. For him to still put up the offensive production, like just the power at his age, is insane. It really is. 531 slugging percentage. You can't ask for much more than that. Well over almost 850 in OPS. That's very good. That's where you start to you're in the talks for some Silver Sluggers type performance. And with Nomar Mazara, he is so young. He still has so far to go. He doesn't walk a lot. We know that. His OBP was only 318 last year. Average, it's over league average at 269, stuff like that. But this is a player who's just going to keep growing and getting better. Nomar Mazara is a tremendous defender. He's quick. He's agile. His durability is up there too. And already having MLB service time at his age is very impressive. And now this is his chance to really break free, because we know that he was on the Rangers, and the Rangers haven't been a playoff contender since 2015 when they got bat flipped by Jose Bautista. So this is a very good chance for Nomar Mazara to break out, maybe hit 280 this year. I'd like to see him work on drawing more walks, maybe being a little bit more patient, because he is a free swinger. And I think that's what makes him so special. But now going into another year in his career, these pitchers are going to start to manipulate him and stuff like that. So it's kind of hand in hand, but I do think Nomar Mazara is going to do very good things with the White Sox.
Yeah, quickly on Edwin, they signed him to be a DH, and that's what he's going to be. I doubt that he sees a whole lot of time at first base, because they just extended Jose Abreu And I think at just being a DH, I think that you're going to get your value out of him. Yeah, they're paying him 12 million for the season, but 34 home runs, 531 slugging percentage. Last year, to 123 OPS plus, and he put up almost 3 WAR. Just as a DH. So
That's very impressive.
I think I think that he's going to be fine for what they're signing him for. I'm not necessarily sold on Nomar Mazara as well as you are. I 96 OPS plus is a little bit below league average last year. Doesn't really get on base a whole lot outside of with hits. Just doesn't walk very much. The White Sox kind of came out and said that they think that he's going to be like a full-time right fielder for them. I personally think that he makes a lot more sense as like a platoon guy because he's kind of struggled over the course of his career against lefties, and so I don't know. I worry about how much are they going to rely on him, and versus lefties, and then him just it just depends whether or not he's going to be able to come through.
Well, I'll tell you this: it's either him or Daniel Palka. Daniel Palka is absolute hot garbage. You want to talk about a guy in a slump? I think he is the near distant cousin of Chris Davis from last year with the Orioles. The dude is absolutely horrific. I think he barely scratched the surface of 100, and even got a late call up in September, and he even got an invite to spring training. I have no idea how, because he went on a tear in 2018. But it's amazing how fast someone can fall off. But that's going to be a big issue, like you said, against lefties. But I don't know. Should we?
Yeah. So, and then if we want to get to the hit the pitchers real quickly,
Yeah.
So they went out and they got Gio Gonzalez, 1 year, $4.5 million. He only pitched in 87 and a third innings last year. Had a lot of injury problems, but in the 87 innings he threw, 3.5 ERA, 1.29 WHIP, 127 ERA plus. And what it also gives him a lot of flexibility because he's a guy that can pitch for you, at the back of the rotation. Maybe he slots in at like the 5, but if a guy like Michael Kopech comes back and he's throwing the ball well, then they can move Gio Gonzalez to the bullpen and suddenly becomes a pretty good lefty out of the pen.
Yeah, I like Gio Gonzalez out of the pen better, for sure. Especially with, they got Dylan Cease coming up. He's a big prospect with the White Sox. And Michael Kopech, if he comes out of Tommy John, like you said, if he just absolutely dominates, which he probably will, he put up decent numbers in minor league ball, it'd be devastating. And having Gio Gonzalez, especially with the durability issues, if he could pitch less innings, that means good news for the White Sox because he could pitch in more games instead of just being stressed and labored, trying to ask for 6 innings out of a veteran pitcher. So, yeah. Who else you got?
Yeah, so Dallas Keuchel, they signed on 3-year, $55 million. I'm not really sure how I feel about Dallas Keuchel. He's a guy that is a pitch to contact kind of guy. Doesn't really get a whole lot of strikeouts. He pitched 112 innings last year, mostly because he sat out, with the whole thing last year with Kimbrel and Keuchel about wanting to get paid a certain amount of money, and so they ended up not signing until the end of May or early June. But the thing about Keuchel is that the WHIP was at almost 1.4, and his FIP was 4.72, which is almost like a whole 100 points higher than his ERA.
Yeah, that's not good at all.
Right, and so the thing about FIP is it's not necessarily good at looking at like as a descriptive statistic looking in the past. Usually ERA is kind of a better of what actually happened, but what FIP's good for is kind of looking forward, like what can you expect in the future from this guy? And when you see that his FIP was a whole 100 points higher than his ERA, that's kind of concerning moving forward because you have to think that he's going to regress further towards that 4.72 instead of remaining at that 3.75. And then I'll go ahead and mention
go for it. Yeah,
Steve Cishek real quickly as well, because he's another guy that out of the bullpen that they signed that 2.95 ERA last year, 1.2 WHIP, but his FIP was 4.54. So you kind of there's a couple of guys that there's going to be some question marks and see how they play out long term.
No, you're absolutely right. But if you bring it back to Dallas Keuchel, he's projected, that way right now. Like you said, 3.74, 3.75. It keeps getting lower and lower in ERA. What year was it that he won? It had to be 20. It was 2015 when he won.
Yeah,
Cy Young.
2015.
2015, where he had 2.48 ERA. And you got to think of the team he was on too. He was with the Houston Astros organization for a certain amount of time. In a new team, you're coming in not mid-season per se, but maybe a quarter of the way in, just past a quarter of the way in the season, it's hard because these starting pitchers, they get into a routine, and getting into a routine starts in spring training. With your workout regimen, if you do band work, weights, whatever, it's important. With Dallas Keuchel, especially being a lefty, um, I think he will be okay because there's not a lot of right-handed sluggers in this division, I should say. The one I could think off the top of my head that I would just worry about really is just Jorge Polanco and Josh Donaldson. Jorge Polanco switch hitter, Donaldson the number he had over 900 OPS season. But
I'll throw two more names in the mix, and Nelson Cruz and Jorge Soler are a couple of guys that
okay, yeah,
crushed the
yeah,
ball
Jorge
last
Soler,
year.
yeah, that's true. Led American League in home runs. That's true. But there's not that many guys. I'm saying,
Yeah, yeah.
And if Keuchel can revert back to his old ways, if the White Sox is really where he wants to be, and he knows he's going to be there not just for a year, just kind of like a pillow contract, which I knew was going to happen. I think you might see a little bit better actually. I don't think it's going to be elite per se, but I think it could be a 3.5 ERA kind of guy. Try and get that whip down to maybe a 1.29, a 1.3. I think that's serviceable.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's serviceable for the White Sox, not necessarily in the contract, but for the White Sox it is. So, yeah. Yeah.
All right, you want to go ahead and get into their lineup?
Oh, yeah. Love their lineup a lot. And another guy we're going to talk about here very, very shortly is in the outfield, potentially joining Eloy Jimenez and Nomar Mazara. But catching is Yasmani Grandal, the former Red, former Brewer, Jose Abreu at first base, and this is the only position for the White Sox that I feel is weak, and it's Leury Garcia. Leury Garcia is not good offensively whatsoever. He hasn't been. He's a speed demon though. He's a switch hitter, but I don't. He's been more known as an outfielder. Yolmer Sanchez, he's kind of abysmal in the infield as well. But, that's a bench player that could maybe give them some potential life, I guess. But second base is always going to be a big hole for them, I feel like. At third base, Yohan Moncada. This is a strong MVP candidate, in my opinion, potentially. Or that could be in the talks, maybe at least towards August. We'll see how that could pan out. Very good young player. Tim Anderson, American League batting title. Tim Anderson, I think he's going to fall off just a little bit, personally, because he just had a career year last year out of nowhere. And like you said, too, it's kind of deceiving, right, with the hits and stuff like that, with his batting average. And then you got Eloy Jimenez, who surprisingly had a pretty good year if you just think about taking a gamble on somebody, never servicing time in Major League Baseball before. And it looks like they're going to be doing that once again with this guy. Let's see if we get the name right. Luis Robert. Did you watch that video I sent you?
I did. My takeaway from it was Robert, but let's just go with it how it is.
Robert.
We're talking about the top prospect, center field prospect for the White Sox. That's who we're talking about, ladies and gentlemen.
How about number 88, Luis? We'll say number 88, Luis. We'll say that. But I mean, quick take on Luis. Yeah. How do you feel about this guy and potentially making an impact for the White Sox?
I think he makes a pretty good impact, but I don't think it's going to be right away. He's a guy that has faced pretty favorable competition in his rise through the minors. And he's another one of those guys that, could be the free swinging type. Honestly, I think he's probably going to have a similar start to what Aristides Aquino had for the Reds, where he comes up, hits for a pretty good amount of power. And for that first month or so, he's probably going to crush the ball because teams aren't going to know how to pitch him. But once you get to about a month, teams can start building scouting reports. And he's a guy that's, he's a guy that's susceptible to chasing sliders and stuff out of the zone. And so I think it's going to take, another month where he probably struggles a bit because teams are going to find out where his holes are in his swing. And then after that, I think maybe we see the play start to level out. So I think it's going to be kind of a really, really high and really low type of season for him.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. I completely agree. and that's the one reason why you don't really see Aquino getting that starting nod for the Reds right now and getting the short end of the stick. And hopefully, with for his sake, he doesn't start to level out. Hopefully, he can just keep mashing baseballs like you said,
Mm.
everything. I forget who it was on the White Sox. It might have been Eloy or Jose Abreu, but one of them said that they were comparing him to Mike Trout, and everyone was like, "Okay, hold on a second, just chill, 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 chill." But I think he's going to be a good prospect, especially for them. They have a very good farm system. The White Sox do. They've been itching for a potential lineup like this for years. You could even say that since 2005 when they surprisingly won the World Series. Um, but this is the funny thing. I actually do think they're the best team in Chicago. I do. I think they're the best team in Chicago. I don't know what everyone else thinks. I like everyone's opinions, but yeah, here I am wearing a Cubs hat.
Right.
I should have worn my White Sox hat today. Dang it. Oh well. But also, you also have Nomar Mazar in the outfield, and then Edwin Encarnacion DHing. And then you could switch out Jose Abreu, Edwin if you wanted to. And James McCann could probably DH and play first base too. James McCann hits very well against lefties, not very good against righties, but he's over 270 against lefties, so you can't go wrong there. What do you think about the rotation?
Yeah, I don't know. I'll quickly talk about the lineup real quick before I talk about the rotation. I'm not sold maybe as much as you are, just because I think there are some serious question marks. I think Yohan Moncada and Tim Anderson see some regression this year, and the question is how much. Um, Eloy Jimenez and Luis number 88, if we're gonna
that's
ignore
just
the
what
last name
that's
for
just what
now.
we're gonna do. That's hilarious.
Those two guys, Jimenez coming into a second year, you never really know. Some guys hit sophomore slumps. Some people, really put it together. He was a guy that also had, some ups and downs last season. With Luis, we kind of already talked about it. You don't really know what you're going to get out of a guy that hasn't had any service time. We talked about Nomar Mazara too. Who knows with him taking on a full-time role, is he going to be able to, produce against lefties, or is he going to become kind of like a black hole in the lineup? And so I'm not necessarily sold on them yet. Uh, Luis Giolito in the rotation is a guy that I think could really break out and kind of be, a stud all-star type of guy. I think with Dallas Keuchel and Gio Gonzalez, you probably kind of know what you're going to get out of those guys at this point in their career. They're probably just going to be, hovering somewhere around league average. I'd say Renato Lopez and Dylan Cease are kind of the two wild cards. They've had a little bit of experience in the majors now, and it's just kind of going to be, are they going to be able to put it together, or are they going to, kind of deal with control issues and struggle? I think the one bright side for this pitching staff is that they're going to get to play the Tigers and the Royals like 30 times a year. And so when you get that kind of help, I think they'll be fine.
Yeah, and that's one thing for everyone to keep in mind when we talk about pitchers in the American League Central. When I say that, I mean the Indians, the White Sox, and the Twins. We can't necessarily let that ERA and the WHIP be defining, because it can be misleading, right? Just kind of like ERAs in the NL West facing the Rockies, maybe 12 times or something like that at Coors Field. It can definitely elevate things, and in this instance, it could help them with their pitching stats. But Lucas Giolito, definitely an ace after last year. He completely changed his mechanics, which I thought was really fascinating. He had a shorter arm, really whipping his arm around. And he found his off speed and was able to command it a lot better than previous years. And I thought that was really interesting to completely transform your mechanics and to be that dominant in that first half of the season, because he had one of the best first halves, actually, like just as good as Garrett Cole, if you really look at the numbers from the first half. The second half, he started to, we'll call it the Aquino effect. Ooh, that actually sounds kind of good, doesn't it? The Aquino effect started to level out. Oh, I like that. I'm going to write that down. Hold on a second. That's nice. That's big nice right there. So the Aquino effect happened to him, and he still put up godly numbers: 29 starts, 176 and 2/3 innings, 228 strikeouts. and 3.41 ERA, 1.06 WHIP. So it's definitely there pitching wise. And with Gonzalez, I do expect him later in the season, especially if he's still dealing with arm issues. They're going to try him out in the pen, maybe as a setup guy or a middle relief guy, or a mop up guy. At his stage of the career, it's a 1 year deal. Just put him as a mop up guy. Save your other arms, your young arms, and whatnot. But one guy I think that's going to come back is Renato Lopez. Renato Lopez had a very down year. Never going to be an ace per se, but he's a little bit better than average with his career if you really look at his numbers. And last year was kind of shocking to see how he fell off. There are a lot of questions, kind of like you said, though. But looking in the future, Dylan Cease, Giolito, Kopech, it's very promising. So I like the rotation a lot. And if we talk about their bullpen, Alex Colon, he's had a heck of a career. Alex Colon, 31 years old, last year, 62 games, a 2.8 ERA, a career ERA of 3.07, 1.19 WHIP. Can't ask for much more out of a reliever. He's been very healthy too over the past couple of years. So, I mean, what are your final takes, man? The White Sox.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sold on this team for this year, but I think that starting next year, this is a team that's going to be at the top in the top two spots of the division probably every year. Especially with the way that the Indians are kind of trending this way here over the last like year and a half. Yeah. I think for the foreseeable future after the season, it's probably going to be the Twins and the White Sox. So
okay.
I'm going to go ahead and move on to the aforementioned Cleveland Indians then.
Yeah, the Cleveland Indians. And this was huge. A lot of people didn't like this, but your key subtraction was Corey Kluber. Your key addition was Emmanuel Clace, guy with a lot of movement, could hurl the ball 100 miles per hour, 101 miles per hour, very young talent. I really like this guy a lot, and it's really, really unfortunate to talk about and to say these things because you hate to see injuries. But Emmanuel Clace out 8 to 12 weeks with upper back strain, and with that doesn't mean that he's just going to go right back to Major League Baseball. You have to rehab. You have to make rehab starts. So it could be July until he comes back. I mean, this really does hurt for the Indians, especially losing Corey Kluber. They got Delino DeShields. Is it Delino or how do you say it? Is it Delino or is it Delino?
Delino.
That's what I thought.
Delino DeShields. Very good defensive player. 638 career OPS, not so much. But Cesar Hernandez, they also got who slashed 279, 333, 408 last year. Just a batting average kind of guy. Somewhat decent on defense, just average. But, 91 OPS plus, so 9 points below the league average there. And a guy I really like that a lot of people don't talk about is Domingo Santana. Domingo Santana hit 253 last year, 329 OBP, and a 441 OPS. Domingo Santana is kind of like one of those sneaky outfielders who can get the job more than just averagely well done defense, and then he can hit the ball very well too. I mean, what are your thoughts on the additions for the Indians? Yeah, I'm a big fan of Emmanuel Clace. Obviously, he got injured, but you also have to think about they gave up Corey Kluber, and for that reason, I'm not too keen on what they got back. Clace is just a relief pitcher prospect, and they got Delino DeShields, who, for the translation for the NL fans, Delino DeShields is basically American League Billy Hamilton. So, when you look at that's all they got back for Corey Kluber, who, struggled, has some injury issues here in the last year, but this is a guy that's Cy Young not that long ago.
2017. Won the Cy Young 2017. What?
and so, I would guess this is a move to save some money, but Emmanuel Clace, when he comes back, is going to be huge for their bullpen. 100th percentile in fastball velocity and 97th percentile in fastball spin. He throws a cutter at 99 miles an hour, which is just stupid to even say. So I think he'll be good for him. Domingo Santana adds some extra offense to their lineup. I think this is a guy that if his walk rate increases, just a little bit more, then I think that he's probably going to do pretty well. I think that it also helps. He's going to be facing the Tigers and the Royals pitching staff a couple times,
Exactly.
or pretty consistently throughout the season. So that's probably going to help his numbers a little bit too. You know, this was an offseason for the Indians that was more about rumors than it was about anything of substance. They talked about Francisco Lindor for, pretty much from the end of the season till here we are in spring training, and it was just in the news not too long ago. And so I don't know. I just they didn't really do a whole lot, which is kind of a trend we're going to see for the next couple teams that we talk about. Is that there just wasn't a whole lot of substance there. So with that in mind, do you want to go ahead and move into the lineup?
Yeah, we can, but I do want to mention too that they don't have Yasiel Puig, who actually hit very well with them once he was traded. And they also don't have Kipnis, but they filled that hole actually better, I think, with Cesar Hernandez. I will say that. But yeah,
Yeah, I don't think you're losing a whole lot either. Obviously, you get rid of Yasiel Puig, but they got Domingo Santana
right,
on a $1.5 million deal. I say the only
a
thing you
lot
lose
cheaper.
maybe there is it is cheaper, and maybe you lose on Puig's defense a little bit, but as much as it's such a home run heavy division, it feels like as far as offensive production goes, I don't think it's going to hurt that much to have a little bit worse in the outfield defense.
Well, and they can get, and it's okay to have that little down part because it is the AL Central. They're in the right division to
Yeah.
not have that tremendous defense. In the outfield. So yeah, their lineup. Let's dive right into that. So we got Roberto Perez behind the dish, very good defensively, a good catcher. Carlos Santana, man, I love this guy so much. Carlos Santana at first base. I love that story about him like beating up like the monitors when he was in Philly for that 1 year or half a year, whatever it was,
Mhm.
because they were playing Fortnite. That's like we're talking about a leader,
Yeah.
dude. That's big nice. Second base, you got Cesar Hernandez. Third base, one guy that was in the MVP votes in 2017 was Jose Ramirez. Now this is a guy like hand on the table, all cards on the table, I should say. Jose Ramirez is definitely going to have a bounce back year. I'm talking he's going to hit probably 30 home runs, go back to his old ways. He's healthy. He doesn't have that hand issue anymore. That's resolved, and that's what really sucked for him. The only thing that is hard for Jose Ramirez, he always starts out slow. He'll start out maybe 2 for 32 or something like that, but then for some reason he just goes on an absolute tear. Jose Ramirez, his slugging percentage is ridiculous. It's like well over 500 for his career. You can't ask for much more than that. Not very good defensively, but offensively, very fast on the base paths, and he can hit for power. His best friend, you should say, right there on the same side of the infield at shortstop, Francisco Lindor. We know he was in trade talks for the Dodgers, the Reds. I'm actually kind of glad he's with the Indians. I would have hated to see him on the Dodgers because that team's already stupid, like with talent.
Yeah.
But they also have Oscar Mercado in the outfield, Domingo Santana, and Greg Allen. And Franmil Reyes, the DH. Franmil Reyes I like a lot too. That was part of that deal last year. I think he could be surprising as well. What are your thoughts on this lineup?
Yeah. There's a lot of up and a lot of down. Cesar Hernandez is obviously going to be a problem. Domingo Santana, you got to hope that his numbers are going to increase. He struggled a little bit last year compared to what he did in Milwaukee, and so obviously you want to see a bit of a bounce back there. Greg Allen is not a guy that's going to help you produce a whole lot, but once you get past those couple names, Franmil Reyes is a guy that lost 20 pounds over the offseason. We're the stereotypical this guy's in the best shape of his life part of the year where everyone comes to spring training. But, Lindor, you're going to get all-star to MVP level play. I agree with you. In fact, I think Jose Ramirez is going to have a pretty good bounce back year. Carlos Santana is a guy that's always going to get on base. And a guy that really didn't get a whole lot of talk about him last year was Roberto Perez. He's been a guy that's been in the league for a while now, and he's been known pretty much predominantly for being a really good defensive catcher. One of those guys that doesn't really hit a ton, but he'll get on base some. But for whatever reason last year, I don't know if he changed something in his swing, but he started hitting for a lot more power. And not necessarily just because the ball was better, but just his swing changed. And hopefully he can keep that going forward. He got a bit more aggressive. He used to be a guy that would go up there and take the first 3 pitches of the at bat and just hope that you can get in a position where he's going to walk. And
Right.
it feels like now he's kind of at the point in his career where he feels like, hey, I can go up there and I can produce at the plate too. And so I think that, as a supporting piece, I think that that could be huge for them. The one thing that does kind of suck for the Indians, and we'll probably talk about this a little bit with the rotation too, is that they're missing a pretty good piece on the bench, or well, a pretty good piece in the starting lineup with Tyler Naquin.
Yeah.
He's 25, 26 years old, pretty good offensive player, plays, league average defense. But, when the guy replacing him is going to be Greg Allen, then that becomes a bit more of a loss because you're just not going to get much offensive production out of Greg Allen.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right, and that does suck a lot. Tyler Naquin reminded me a lot of Grady Sizemore in a way, just like with the defensive play. Offensively, you're gonna miss Naquin's bat, but with Jose Ramirez coming back, I think there's gonna be certain players that do pick that up.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it's just gonna be really hard for them overall when you compare them to the Twins and the White Sox with the type of production they can offer to the table per se. What was I gonna say? Oh, Roberto Perez. Roberto Perez, though, you talk about him. Yeah, he did hit for a lot more power. 24 home runs. His career high in a season was 8, and that was in 2017. So he still doesn't hit for average per se, but catching, you can deal with that as a catcher. I'd rather have a defensive catcher that can throw guys out and block balls and stuff like that more than offensive, because I have guys that can pick you up. That's the whole part of a team. So I see where you're coming though, for sure. You want to talk about their starting rotation?
Yeah. So
real quick, can I say one more thing?
Okay. Yep.
So we had a question. In our chat. Do you think Lindor is getting traded?
I do, honestly. Like I think at this point we're looking at it's probably going to be the deadline, but as much as he's been in the trade talks, you got to think where there's smoke, there's probably fire. And, obviously the Dodgers went out and they got Mookie Betts, and so maybe they don't necessarily need him. But it wouldn't surprise me if like a team like the Cincinnati Reds goes out at the deadline and thinks, let's just go all in and just ship some prospects off and get Francisco Lindor. Freddie Galvis, the guy that's their shortstop right now, is not necessarily going to do a whole lot for you offensively. I mean, he had his career high last year in pretty much everything, and a lot of that was due to the ball. And I would say that Jose Garcia, despite what he's done here in the first week of spring training, is probably a year and a half away from like really being truly MLB ready. And so I think Lindor fits that timeline. So I think he's a guy that, the Reds would make a lot of sense as a place for him to go. Yeah,
there's only logistically for me, I only see him possibly going to 2 teams if he does get traded. I don't think it would be the Dodgers because I don't think they'll need him, and you have Corey Seager. You have Gavin Lux, who's number 2 MLB prospect for top 100. The 2 teams I see Francisco Lindor going to at the deadline. Now, if they're making a playoff push or they're near, that mark, or if they're not near that mark, if they're not making a playoff push, because that's when they'll ship him off.
Right.
The Reds, like you said, because the Reds, as it sits now, offensively, just statistically on paper, they're favored to win the NL Central. It's just objective. That's an objective statement. The other team that I could see Francisco Lindor going to, which might shock some people, it's in the NL East, and it's the New York Mets. The New York Mets, because that's a division that we talked about, just like the NL Central. It is so hard to categorize those teams. We know the Braves are going to be near the top. There's no doubt about that. But with the pitching that the Mets have and the young talent, you just never know. And especially in baseball, that's a great thing. You just never know. The Mets could go on a hot streak towards the deadline, maybe just above 500 or so like that, maybe 6 games above 500. Yeah, they might make a pinch. They might make a move. I don't know if they have the prospects in return. That's the issue. But those are the only 2 teams I could honestly say I could see Lindor going to at this point for a trade. So, but I do think he will get traded if the Indians do not have a chance of making the playoffs, for sure. Definitely. Yeah. But do you want to talk about the rotation now? Sorry about that.
Yeah, no. This is going to be a pretty interesting rotation to watch. It came out I guess a week and a half ago that Clevenger having some injury issues, so that's kind of going to suck for them at the start of the season. But then you got a couple of guys that are young and not super proven. Obviously, Shane Bieber had a pretty good year last year, but is he going to be able to sustain that? Zach Plesac, son of Dan Plesac from MLB Network and former Brewer pitcher, he came up and he pitched pretty well in the time that he spent in the majors. But who knows with him either. And the same thing with Logan Allen. The one guy that's kind of been a mainstay in the rotation here recently has been Carlos Carrasco. And, obviously he had to miss some time last year. And so what's he going to be when he comes back? So I don't know. To me, there's just a whole lot of question marks with their rotation.
Yeah, that's all you really can put on it are question marks. And I would love to see Carlos Carrasco just absolutely shove. I would.
Mm-hmm.
I just love seeing that. And for him to come back in 2019, just what that took, you can't even really look at his stats, man. I mean, that takes so much courage and like just mental toughness to be able to do that. If you look in 2018, 2017, 2016, his ERA averages at 3.30. That's very good. WHIP right around 110. If he can go back to that, because you can't look at the sample size from 2019, and if he's fully healthy now, it could be good for them. Maybe that could fill that void for Clevenger being out.
Mm-hmm.
And then Shane Bieber, he kind of helped fill that void, with Kluber being shipped off. Shane Bieber has been tremendous so far. He actually just pitched today, 2 2/3 hitless innings in the Cactus League start against the Diamondbacks. He's been very good. He's only 24 years old. I think this is just a start for him. He's going to be an ace for years to come. The one thing I like that I expect him to do more is increase his strikeout numbers. So he had 259 strikeouts in 214 and a third innings last year. I think he could start to hover around near that 275, maybe 280 strikeout range. But, it is a question. We just don't know. Time will tell. But those are my thoughts. But yeah, man, their rotation is looking pretty bleak right now. But Zach Plesac, you just don't know either. Logan Allen, and then their bullpen is just not looking good whatsoever for them. And that's why I have them in my standings for that reason. When we get to it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, do you have any thoughts? Any final thoughts?
No, I think we've covered it. That there's just a lot of question marks. I think there are a couple of guys that are kind of interesting. Their bullpen, obviously, Brad Hand, a guy that they acquired from the Padres. Was it during last season or somewhere within the last?
It was 2 years ago. Yeah,
2 years ago they got Brad Hand. He's been pretty solid for them as a closer. Emmanuel Clase, once he comes back, is going to be pretty good for them. And the other guy, and his first name's escaping me, so you're just going to have to forgive me, but his last name is Karinchak. And this dude is absolutely filthy. If you have the time, please just go on YouTube and just type in like his last name and highlights, or you might even be able to type in Emmanuel Clase highlights, because there's a video
James
out there.
Karinchak.
Yeah. But there's a video out there on YouTube it's 1 minute long, and it's just highlights of Emmanuel Clase and James Karinchak throwing pitches, and just take the time out of your day to go watch it, because it's just great.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we can go ahead and move on then to one of the first two teams of the all season that just did pretty much nothing. Yeah, so the Detroit Tigers have added Ivan Nova, Cameron Maybin, and Jonathan Scope, and they did not have any significant losses. Frankly, I don't know if they had anybody on their roster that would have been considered significant if they had left. But any thoughts on the three guys they added?
Ivan Nova will give you games.
He will give you games.
The only move that was good that kind of opened my eyes, I was like, oh, they actually did something. It was Cameron Maybin. We talked about Maybin in the AL East preview. Had a very good year, kind of re-solidifying his career a little bit. And that's actually a guy that the Yankees probably wish they still had at this point, because that would be huge for them. But Cameron Maybin will 100% get traded. at the deadline. There's no doubt in my mind. Same with Jonathan Scope. I don't see why they would stay if it's a year deal. Tigers, just ship them off, try and get some decent prospects back. Maybe they won't be able to because Maben's 33 and Scope isn't the same Scope that he used to be.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, and dude, this lineup is just the best player that I'm looking at right now in their lineup is Nico Goodrum.
Yeah, do you want to go ahead and run through the lineup real quick?
This will be quick. This is going to be quick. So they're catching. They have Austin Romine. First base, CJ Cron. CJ Cron used to be with the Angels. Used to be somewhat decent, I guess, offensively, but, he's like way past his prime. Somebody get him a stool. Jonathan Scope. As you know, he was a player with the Baltimore Orioles organization. Did very well when they were a playoff team, back in 2014, 2015-ish. Jaime Candelario is a big prospect for the Tigers. Just not the same. He's just not that good. Nico Goodrum is by far your best player that you have. Nico Goodrum, he dabbled most of the time at second base, but he does play every position, just kind of like Brock Holt and everything like that. That could be a guy, actually, that could be sneaky, that could get shipped off to a potential playoff team, maybe the Braves, maybe the Phillies. It just depends. And then you got Cameron Maben in the outfield, Kristen Stewart, not from Twilight, Jacoby Jones, and you got Miguel Cabrera, the DH. And we all know Miguel Cabrera, big name, but not the same player. So, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think when you look at the Tigers lineup, there's probably two names worth watching, and that's Nico Goodrum and Miguel Cabrera. Nico Goodrum because, he's pretty young, and I think that he has a chance to actually develop into a pretty good player, pretty versatile. He's got a little bit of pop for being a shortstop. I think if he were to get traded out of Detroit, his numbers would probably see even more of an increase because that ballpark is just absolutely massive. And then Miguel Cabrera because, he's a future Hall of Famer. Might as well enjoy him while he's here, and just kind of watching him as he kind of creeps towards any more milestones that he might hit before, he finally retires. Briefly on the pitching staff, guys to watch: Michael Fulmer, Matt Boyd, and Joe Jimenez.
Thank you for not saying Jordan Zimmerman.
Why would I? No. Yeah. But, those three guys are guys that actually have some potential. Joe Jimenez pitched pretty well in the bullpen last year. He's a guy that it wouldn't surprise me if at the deadline they went ahead and moved. You could probably say the same for Michael Fulmer and Matt Boyd. They're kind of getting past that point where they're going to be, young enough to be involved in the next playoff window for the Tigers whenever that finally happens. And
Not
so
for a
I
long
think that,
time.
right. And so I think that they'll probably start to move guys like Michael Fulmer and Matt Boyd in order to get some spots in the rotation for guys like Casey Mize and the rest of their pitching prospects as they begin to come up. And guys like probably worth mentioning Tarek Skubal as well. He's another guy that throws really hard. I'd say those two are probably the guys to keep an eye on.
Yeah, kind of similar. This is kind of a Homer Bailey situation here for the Tigers. Jordan Zimmerman. You look at his numbers when he was with the Nationals. This was a guy who threw a no-hitter. Tremendous pitcher. Let's get this guy, clap your hands, great signing. He's been atrocious. Over a 6 ERA his entire time that he's been with the Tigers. The dude gave up 4 earned runs in his last spring training start. Folks, if you are listening, spring training is mostly against prospects, okay? Okay? Guys that haven't even had service time. Jordan Zimmerman has been in the league for a hot minute. Jordan Zimmerman is not good. Cannot wait for that day where Casey Mize comes up, pats Jordan Zimmerman on the behind, says thanks, and then Jordan Zimmerman becomes a pitching coach, ironically, for the Tigers, because I could see that happening. But you look at their bullpen, Joe Jimenez, guy that's gonna suck not to have is Shane Green. Shane Green was phenomenal with them last year in that first half. Then he got shipped to the Braves and absolutely sucked. It's gonna be a long time coming before these Tigers are even good. And I was pretty generous with my record even because they actually had the worst record last year, I believe, in Major League Baseball.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah. So, do you have any other final thoughts, or are you ready to move on to the Royals?
oh, I'm definitely ready to move on to the Royals. How about you?
Yeah. So, believe it or not, the Royals found a way to do even less than the Tigers this offseason, which they added Michael Franco on a 1 year, almost $3 million deal, who was DFA'd by the Phillies. And then they also, not necessarily a key addition, but they brought back Greg Holland. So I guess that'll be interesting to see if he can kind of find his former self with them. And then they didn't lose anybody. Thoughts on either of those guys?
Nope.
All right, you want to move on to the lineup?
Dude, not at all. I'm just
All right, well, I'll read through it real quick.
go for it.
Salvador Perez, Ryan O'Hearn at first base, Nicky Lopez at second, Michael Franco at third, Adalberto Mondesi at shortstop. In the outfield, we're looking at Whit Merrifield, Hunter Dozier, Alex Gordon, and a DH, Jorge Soler. Thoughts?
Yeah, actually. So I think Adalberto Mondesi is one of the best young shortstops in the game of baseball. I would actually probably put him in my top five. Actually, I really like the type of player he is, especially for the Royals. It's going to be a good starting point, good foundation, because seeing a team fall off like that after 2014 and 2015 when they won the World Series, it's absolutely shocking, really, if you think about it. And what's really interesting too, Alberto Mondesi, he's only 24 years old. Okay, he hit 263 last year. He's a tremendous defensive player. And I think he could have a breakout year because he had a pretty decent year last year if you look at his average. And he stole 43 bags. I mean, we know Major League Baseball kind of fell off that edge of stolen bases, but him and Whit Merrifield, I think it's kind of cool how they battle to and fro for stolen bases and stuff like that. But one thing he's been laboring on this spring training is a shoulder issue. But I think he'll be ready for opening day for sure. Jorge Soler had an amazing year. Now, this is a guy, you hear Jorge Soler, you think Cubs. I think Cubs because I remember he was huge for the Cubs. I don't even remember why, but he was. And for some reason, I thought Jorge Soler was like 35, 36 years old. I just did because it seems like he's been in the league for so long. He's only 28 years old. Now, he's not very good defensively per se, but he put up very good offensive numbers the past 2 years. And it's a slept-on player because you don't hear about him that much. And when you think about somebody as a face of the franchise, because when I went there in 2017, they had Eric Hosmer and they had Jorge Soler, like banners on their stadium. I was like, Jorge Soler? Like, what? Why? But now I know why. Dude mashed 48 home runs, 117 ribbies, 923 OPS last year. Very good. And then the last player that I really like and I hate to see on the Royals, and I know I mentioned him just a minute ago, is Whit Merrifield. Whit Merrifield is one of the most electric players in Major League Baseball. Reminds me of a young Dustin Pedroia. Normally as a second baseman, but he plays outfield as well, and he will play outfield probably for the Royals this season. He avoided arbitration this year as well. No, it was last year he avoided arbitration. I think he has 2 more years under contract, but that you never know too. You might be able to get some good prospects out of Whit Merrifield if you ship him off too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I mean, what are your thoughts on the lineup?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've covered pretty much everyone that I was going to talk about anyways. I think...
Sorry.
No, you're fine. Salvador Perez, is a guy that if he stays healthy could be an interesting piece. And, he's kind of been the guy that has been there. I think, well, outside of him and Alex Gordon are probably the 2 longest tenured guys on this team. And so it'll be interesting to see if Salvador Perez can stay healthy, if they might try to move him at the deadline and get something for him. Because, catching's typically a premium position, a position that you see a lot of injuries at. And so if you get down to it and there's a competing team, Salvador Perez can make a lot of sense for him. You covered pretty much everything else, and I agreed with what you said on everybody, so I'm not going to just repeat a bunch of stuff in the interest of time.
Real quick, can I say one more thing?
Do you have – yep.
God bless Alex Gordon because you have stayed with the Royals through the bad times, through the great times, back down to the nitty gritty. Because usually after you reach that peak, you win the World Series with a team, and then just after 1 year, if you fall off, why would you want to resign? Why would you want to come back? Kudos to him because that honestly, I admire that. Yeah.
Yep. So, one other note, just Mike Matheny was named their manager this offseason, former Cardinals manager. Other than that, any other final thoughts on the Royals, or do you want to move on to the Twins?
I just agree with King Kong Lee, who left a comment on our YouTube live stream. Sad to see Salvador Perez fall off. He was his favorite catcher at one point, his or she favorite catcher, I don't know. I think Salvador Perez is going to come back. Not as good, but like you said, he could be serviceable to another team. And at this point in his career, as hard as it will be for Royals fans to say goodbye to him and stuff like that, I think you need to, because you can't just live. You do need to think about the future, especially when you're at the bottom of the weakest division in baseball. So those are my final thoughts. Yep.
All right, well, let's move on to the Twins then, who actually did some stuff this offseason.
Yeah, go Twins, baby!
Yep, so we can go ahead and get into probably their biggest move of the offseason, and that is that they signed Josh Donaldson to a 4-year, $92 million contract. Josh Donaldson, 6.1 B-WAR last season, 37 home runs, 127 OPS plus, 259, 379, 521 slash line. How you feeling about this, Rob?
Oh, I absolutely love it. I am gonna say this. I am shocked that he didn't re-sign with the Braves because I feel like the Braves are a stronger team as a whole. But I could also see why he went to Minnesota because it is a weaker division. If you have the right pieces, this could be a team that could turn some heads. And I think you're not going to see the same Minnesota team that you saw last year where they won 100-some ball games. And I knew that they were going to get mollywopped by the Yankees. But I think if they were to face off again, I do think the Yankees would beat the Twins, but I think the Twins would, have some more fight in them. I think they've added some good pieces.
Yeah.
I really, really like Josh Donaldson, especially because, he started his career off with the Oakland Athletics. He actually caught Dallas Braden's perfect game, believe it or not. He caught Dallas Braden's perfect game. A lot of people don't know that.
Didn't know that.
And then he moved to third base, and the dude has been electric ever since. We know his MVP year in 2015, monster season where he hit 41 bombs. This past year in 2019 was the first time he hit over 30 home runs in 3 years. He kind of reverted back to his old ways because he fell off in Toronto towards the end. In Cleveland, he was just kind of a get guy, didn't do bad, but it's just not that great of a sample size. But that pillow contract, and I really like the idea of pillow contracts for guys that really fell off or they just need some a revamp in their career. It was perfect. It was perfect for Josh Donaldson because we know he can be an elite hitter, and he still is a very good defender at his age. Being 34 years old, he can still play a very good third base. And I know I'm rambling on about Josh Donaldson, but that's what I said about when he shipped off. That's when Matt Chapman started to brain himself. I was like, all right, we had who was it? We had Brett Lawrie as our third baseman after Donaldson left. It was atrocious. That's actually my least favorite baseball player, if anyone wants to know that. Brett Lawrie, my least favorite baseball player in history. But then when Matt Chapman came up, I was like, oh yeah, this is the next Josh Donaldson. And now you look at his career, how it started to pan out in his first 3 years. It's like, wow, it's crazy. The Oakland Athletics, their farm system for third baseman is just ridiculous. Okay. Anyway, that was Josh Donaldson, and I expected him to have a monster season, just feasting on pitchers in the AL Central. And Minnesota is more of a pitcher-friendly ballpark, more than SunTrust Park, but he has just raw power. Hitting gap to gap, he might get some triples in there and stuff like that. You'll see an uptick in his slugging percentage, I think.
Yep. So, in the interest of time, because we're starting to run a little bit long here, I'm going to list off the rest of the additions and the subtract. So the rest of the additions, they added Kenta Maeda in the big trade in the Mookie Betts deal. They also added Homer Bailey on a 1-year, $7 million deal, and Rich Hill, who is injured, wouldn't come back until about midway through the season on 1 year, $3 million.
Yeah.
As far as subtractions go, Cole Stewart, Kyle Gibson, CJ Crone, Jonathan Scope, who we mentioned earlier, and Brusdar Graterol, which was the return for Maeda. Did any of those guys stand out to you at all as far as additions or subtractions go?
I do want to talk about Kenta Maeda for a second. I do not like that trade. I do think Kenta Maeda will be decent, I guess, for the Twins. But giving a guy up like Brusdar Graterol for a 31-year-old pitcher that's kind of been average, I don't know if I'm a fan of it because Brusdar Graterol is only 21 and he still has a lot of baseball left in him for sure. And, it's kind of, I don't like the fact that we don't have a good enough sample size on Brusdar Graterol to make a depiction if this was a steal for the Dodgers or a steal for the Twins. You know what I mean? So that's where it kind of sits uneasy with me. But we do know the Twins needed pitching. They needed it bad. You look at their rotation, it's just a bunch of not like a solidified ace. Even you look at Jose Barrios, if you really do look at his career numbers, it's not like overly impressive. It's not like a solidified ace. He's an average 3.30, 3.40 ERA guy, and that's your ace.
Mm-hmm.
That is actually very worrisome to me, especially in the AL Central. And I think it's going to be good for the Twins to have Kenta Maeda. He's going to throw a lot of strikes. 169 strikeouts and 153 and 2/3 innings pitched last year. But I just don't know, man. This is one of the first trades that I've seen this offseason where I'm just kind of like, well, I don't know about that. So, what about you?
I actually liked this trade for the Twins, mostly because they desperately need starting pitching. Obviously they added Homer Bailey, they added Rich Hill, but Rich Hill's not going to be back until halfway through the season. Homer Bailey's Homer Bailey. If you look at his track record here over the past 4 years, can't exactly count on him to be healthy. Michael Pineda's got hit with a suspension, so he's going to be out for a while too. So, Kenta Maeda slots in as the number 3 in their rotation. He's a guy last year at 4 ERA, which round league average, but a 1.07 WHIP, 169 strikeouts and 153 innings. And if all it takes is giving up a relief pitcher prospect to get a solid number 3 in your rotation, I think you make that deal.
And cash too. I don't know how much cash it was though. Do you remember? There's cash involved, I think.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much cash it was, but I think even with the cash, I still make that deal. It got them something that they need. And with Kenta Maeda, he's a guy that with the Dodgers, he kind of flipped back and forth between the rotation and the bullpen. So maybe you get halfway through the season, you decide, we're going to give Rich Hill some run in the rotation. We want to switch Kenta Maeda to be a guy that's just going to come in, if they need some long relief type of multiple inning type relief outings, then he could be that guy as well.
Mm-hmm. One addition that we don't have on the rundown that they brought back was Sergio Romo. By the way, I want to talk about him just for a brief moment. Really, really like Sergio Romo, clubhouse guy, won a World Series with the Giants. Unfortunately, it was in 2012 and 2014. Had to see him celebrate in 2012, which was heartbreaking. But, dude, you look at their bullpen with Trevor May and Tyler Clipper. These are guys who have like a 2.6, 2.7 ERA. That's nasty. Like, their bullpen's good. And like you said with Kenta Maeda, like how he kind of went back and forth. If it doesn't work out, you can put him in the bullpen. And I'm looking at their depth chart right now. They have, when Pineda comes back too, that could raise the question, okay, well, do we put Maeda back in the bullpen? And that would actually kind of save his arm a little bit for the playoffs. So if they get there, we'll talk about that here in just a little bit. But yeah, I see where you're coming from, for sure.
Yeah. So do you want to move on to their lineup, which is absolutely insane?
Oh, yes, please. I'd love to. Okay. So behind the dish, Mitch Garver, we talked about him a lot. I talked about him being a breakout player And a lot of people say, well, you already had a breakout year. Yeah, but it's still not that great of a sample size. And every year he's progressed consistently. I expect him to hit 280, 285 this year. I'd like to see his intangibles on defense a little bit better, but I think he'll get there. He's still very young, one of the best catchers in baseball right now. Miguel Sano at first base. Slugging percentage is unreal. Dude just mashes baseball. He's a free swinger. He does strike out a lot. Another guy that I like is Luis Arias. Not a good sample size, but he played second base. Very good defensively. You got Josh Donaldson at third, who had over 900 OPS last year, elite level. Yet again, top 5 shortstops in the league, in my opinion. Jorge Polanco hits from both sides of the plate, just raw defensively. Honestly, a 5-tool player at shortstop, if you say so. Then you got Max Kepler, Eddie Rosario, and Byron Buxton in the outfield, and Nelson Cruz as the DH. Dude, top to bottom, man, this is a solid lineup. Solid.
Oh yeah, there's no, a lot of the teams that we've previewed so far over the first couple episodes, there's been like, you can point at one spot or two spots in the lineup and go, yeah, this is a hole. This is going to be the question mark for this team, but it just doesn't exist in this team's lineup. Last season the Twins broke the record for most home runs by an MLB team in a season, and they broke that in August with a whole month to go. And then this offseason, they go out and add Josh Donaldson, who hit 37 home runs last year.
Well, baseballs were also juiced last year, too, but still, that's insane.
Insane. But the whole month to go, though, like that's wild.
Yeah, that is wild.
And so, obviously the power numbers are probably going to dip because I would imagine that the MLB is going to de-juice the baseball a little bit. But adding Josh Donaldson probably helps counteract that. And this team's still going to hit for all kinds of power and, match that with they get to play the Tigers and the Royals, like we said about a couple other different teams in here. They're just, I guess I can kind of jump ahead a little bit and say they're definitely my favorites to win this division. So I don't know. I love the salt lineup.
They're mine too. And the 3 names right off the bat that could hit 40 plus home runs: Miguel Sano, Josh Donaldson, Nelson Cruz. It's crazy. These guys, Josh Donaldson, Nelson Cruz, they're, further on in their career. Nelson Cruz further, obviously, but still being able to produce offensively, those kind of numbers, they could very easily hit 40 plus home runs for sure. Then you throw Kepler in there, could hit 30. It's just a solid team. And then we didn't even talk about their bench, man. Their bench is very nice too. They got Marwin Gonzalez, platoon guy. He could play everywhere. You put him at first base, third base, outfield. Alex Avila, another catcher. That's a good backup, honestly, for Mitch Garver. Luis Astudillo can play first base, can play third base. He can also catch. He's literally like me. He's 5'9". He's a big guy, but he can run. I love that. I love that guy so much. And Jake Cave, an outfielder. That's just another fifth option, if you want to say so. Dude, there's no holes in this lineup offensively. There's just not. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, the only thing that concerns me about the Twins is the rotation. Obviously, like we talked about, they've got Jose Barris at 1 and Jacob DeRizzi at 2, who I'm pretty confident in what they're going to get out of them. But once it gets up past that, it's a pretty steep drop-off. You're looking at maybe not super steep with Maeda at 3, but then Homer Bailey at 4, a half season of Rich Hill at 5, maybe when he comes back. Michael Pineda's also suspended. Like, there's just a lot of question marks as far as it goes once you get past those first 3 guys. But you counteract that with the fact that they've got a bullpen with Taylor Rogers, Trevor May, Sergio Romo, Tyler Duffy, Tyler Clippard. They're just, I think that this is going to be a super good team this year.
Here's the thing that I like to say. So I'm going to predict Homer Bailey's numbers this year. Okay. I'm going to predict his numbers. So his numbers are going to be 9 and 11. Okay. 4.40 ERA and a 1.35 WHIP. True definition of average. He's going to be the most average pitcher because he was average. He did pretty decent in Oakland. He did not do bad at all. When he got to that pitcher ballpark, the pitcher atmosphere, and you go to Minnesota, you look at the other ballparks, like you said, Comerica Park, Kauffman Stadium. These are more pitcher-friendly ballparks, and he's really not that good. That's why I'm saying he's going to get average numbers. So, but yeah, shall we move on to our standings, my good sir?
We shall.
Okay, do you want to go first? Give us your lineups, or not lineups, your standings, and tell us who wins the division and if you have any other wild card potential teams. Go for it.
Yeah, so I've changed my predictions. I know we talked about this beforehand, and I've changed my predictions a little bit because I've talked myself into switching some stuff around. So I'm going to have the Twins in first at 93, the Indians in second at 86 wins, the White Sox in third at 82 wins, the Royals at 66, and then the team record that I messed with the most, I have the Tigers in last place. And after talking about their lineup, I decided to demote them to 60 wins and 102 losses. And even that, it feels a little bit generous. But yeah, for me, I'm not sold yet on the White Sox for this season. That's why I have them in third place. Obviously, the Indians rotation, is kind of a big question mark. But I also think Lindor is going to have an MVP type year. I think Jose Ramirez is going to bounce back for sure, and that's going to be huge for them as far as because he's another guy that could be another MVP candidate. And then you're looking at two right there on the left side of their infield. Uh, Partner that with Frambo Reyes, Carlos Santano, Roberto Perez's uptick. Oscar Mercado is a guy that kind of surfaced himself as a good player last year, and then and then the bullpen, Brad Hand, Nick Wickren, Emmanuel Clase when he comes back, James Karinchak. I think they've got the pieces to. I don't think they're going to make a wild card, so I guess I'll go ahead and say I have the Twins as my only playoff team, but I don't know. I think they've got enough to get at least into the second spot in the division for this season.
Okay. Okay. I see where you're coming from. Not bad. Not bad. I think we pretty much agree, except for second and third place teams. So for Minnesota, I have them winning 95 games, winning the division. Offensively, they're just completely stout, very stoic. I think they're not going to have to worry about their pitching per se. I think their pitching is going to put up decent enough numbers to help them out because offensively, they're going to go on an absolute tear. Pitcher Phipps should be decent as well. Defensively, you look around the diamond, very good, except maybe first base. Miguel Sano, not that great with range. But if you look at the other 7 positions on the ball field, excluding the pitcher and first baseman, they look pretty solid. So I have them at 95 wins. I have the White Sox in second place, actually. I know this is a big jump, but, I just have a hunch. I have a feeling, and I want to go with that feeling. I have them at 88 wins. I just think pitching is going to be there, especially if Kopech comes back, if Cease can live up to the hype as well, being a young prospect. Giolito, if he can have that first half of the season, the entire season, if he can just kind of find that touch again. Their bullpen is just as good as the Twins, too. They have 3 or 4 guys that are about sub-3 ERA. You can't go wrong there. They also play in a pitcher ballpark, friendly ballpark. So I have them in second. I have the Indians actually in third because of their starting pitching question marks right now, especially their bullpen. Offensively, like you said, Lindor will have an MVP candidate type year. He's been putting up those numbers since he came into the league. Ramirez will have a bounce back year. I think that they're still going to have a fighting chance come early September, but I just think they're going to taper off a little bit. I have them winning 83 games. In fourth place, I'm right there with you, the Kansas City Royals. I have them winning 69 ball games. They have their future isn't necessarily bright. It's like one of those light bulbs that are starting to, strengthen. Like one of those stadium lights. When you turn it on, you can see it start to turn on just a little bit. I think it's going to take a couple years for them to get back to where they want to be, at least in wild card contention, especially if that new playoff format that we talked about starts to come into effect in 2023, then things change, right? And then dead last, Detroit Tigers. Them and the Orioles are going to have the worst records in Major League Baseball. Just kind of like you, I changed it around too. Originally, I had them at 63 wins. But, after talking to you and discussing and looking at their lineups, really what they have, especially if they ship out Nico Goodrum, if they ship out Cameron Maybin, dude, 55 wins. I have them at 55 wins. That's very bold, okay? Just take that into consideration, everyone, what I'm saying with that, okay? That is not good. That's 55 and 107, okay? That's bad. Last year,
It is really bad.
Last year, they were 47 and 100 and something. It was just awful. But those are my standings, and then I actually have the Twins winning the division, and then wild card is the White Sox. So that means I didn't have a wild card in the AL East. So that means my other wild card team is in the American League West, and everyone will have to tune in and find out in 2 weeks. But yeah, so pretty good stuff, huh?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep. So
should we end it with our
we'll
closing
start
segment?
one, cut one, bench one.
Yeah. So as everyone knows, this is our original segment: start one, cut one, bench one, where I give Noah 3 players. We go around the diamond. He gives me 3 players, and we have to start one of them, cut one of them, and bench one of them. So today we have center fielders and we have right fielders. So Noah, your center fielders. Since we are in lights and talks of the AL Central, I thought it was only appropriate to give you these players. Number 1, Byron Buxton. Your second player, Whit Merrifield. Number 3, Oscar Mercado. Start one, cut one, bench one.
Okay, well, I think Whit Merrifield's an easy start. This guy hit, I believe, has been around 200 hits per season over the past couple of years. All-star caliber type player on a team that doesn't really do a whole lot. Can play a lot of different positions, steal some bags. Doesn't really hit for a whole lot of pop, but he doesn't really need to. Just all overall a really good all-star type player. So I'm going to go with him as my start. For my bench, I'm going to go with Oscar Mercado. He's a guy that kind of came on pretty decently last year with the Indians. He can play a couple different positions, hit for average, not necessarily a guy that's going to hit for a lot of power, which is kind of the trend with this group of guys. But, he's got some speed to play pretty good defense for you as well, hit for a bit more average than the guy that I'm going to cut, which is Byron Buxton. This guy that's been called a top prospect for a while now, just hasn't really ever fully put it together and reached his potential. One of the fastest guys in the major leagues, but he doesn't really hit for a whole lot of average, doesn't really hit for a whole lot of power. And so because he's just kind of a one or two trick pony with defense and speed, I'm going to go ahead and have to cut him.
Interesting. Okay, I like your takes. Noah. For me, I would agree with you in starting Whit Merrifield. I think that was a very easy choice. Steals a lot of bases, hits for average, OBP's up there. You never know. Maybe in a couple years, or maybe next year even, maybe a MVP finalist per se, maybe a top 5 MVP candidate. You never know. I really like Whit Merrifield. On my bench, I actually have Byron Buxton because he does have that speed and he is very good defensively, and also because I beat you in MLB The Show with him. I'm sorry, too soon. No, but for real, you're right there with the batting average. He hasn't been living up to the hype the past couple of years, but he kind of came back after last year. He surged. He hit 30 doubles, 10 bombs, and he stole 14 bags. The OBP still needs to get up there, though. He doesn't walk a whole lot, per se, but I really like what he has to offer. Oscar Mercado, it's just not a good sample size for me for his career. Yes, he came into the league, hit 269 last year, but OPS not quite there, just over league average, 761. But, they're right around that same age range, so that's why I wanted to put those guys in there. So, yeah. So I think we agree except for the bench and cut. So what do you got for me?
All right, so I've got right fielders for you, and kind of went the opposite route than you did, that I went with pretty much power guys. And so for you, I have Joey Gallo, Max Kepler, and JD Martinez.
JD Martinez, even though he's a DH, I like it.
Well, MLB, their shredder thing or whatever they do, where
okay.
they listed him as a right fielder, so I figured he's fair game.
Let me ask you a question. Are we talking Joey Gallo as a career player, or are we talking Joey Gallo from last year?
We're just talking Joey Gallo.
Just Joey Gallo.
However you want to interpret it.
Oh, man. Well, he's only 26 years old, I will say that. And the dude had an absolutely stupid year last year. I mean, it was insane how he just came out. Joey Gallo was a guy that hit just over the Mendoza line. but it's very sketchy to me how he can just all of a sudden, hit 253 and slug almost 1,000 or OPS of 1,000. It's just stupid how good he was last year. But I'm actually going to bench him. I'm going to bench Joey Gallo just because, it would be nice to have that bat, in late stages of a ball game. Have him step up to the plate, either strike out or hit a bomb, But especially being a switch hitter, that's very, very valuable in Major League Baseball today. I will go ahead and start Max Kepler because JD Martinez is more than abysmal in the outfield. I'm surprised they didn't have him as a left fielder, to be honest with you. But now, if we're talking JD Martinez as a whole player from 2013, 2014, we're talking different. We'll have a different conversation. But I'll start Max Kepler. Max Kepler has really jumped on the scene in Major League Baseball, especially with the Twins in such an elusive lineup. This is a guy who could bat cleanup. He could bat leadoff if you really wanted him to. And he's just going to keep progressing and progressing. And then, unfortunately, I'll cut JD Martinez. I love JD Martinez a lot. Hits for a lot of power and stuff like that. But, for me, I like to think of it not just the offensive side. I like to think of the defensive side as well and his speed. And it's just not there for me. So I start Kepler, bench Gallo, and I cut JD Martinez. What about you?
I start Gallo, bench Kepler, and cut JD Martinez. So we agree on that one at least. Obviously the sample size was pretty small for Joey Gallo last year in 70 games, but in 70 games, 22 home runs, 145 OPS plus, and he was able to put up 3 WAR in less than half a season. And to me, I think that's pretty impressive to do as a player. He's a guy that can play first, third, any 3 of the outfield positions, as well as DH. So there's a lot of versatility there.
He's a huge dude. My gosh.
He is a huge dude, but he can be, that's the thing though, like for being as big as he is, he's pretty quick as well.
Yeah.
So partner that with a slugging percentage, 2,000th of a point below 600, and I'll take him as my starter. For my bench, I'm going with Max Kepler, 4 WAR last year, 122 OPS plus, 36 home runs. Plays pretty good defense in the outfield. Probably a little bit above average runner. This kind of thing we talked about last year. He's a guy that he can play on both sides of the ball, and that's kind of what was the deciding factor for me in cutting JD Martinez. Is that, like you said, he's just absolutely abysmal in the outfield. But I mean, at the plate, 140 OPS plus, 36 home runs, 3.3 WAR. 304 batting average, 383 on base, and a 557 slugging is nothing to laugh at either. But
no,
obviously we got to cut somebody, and so I guess for both of it's JD Martinez.
Yeah, this is what I like about this segment because we have different viewpoints. We have different things that we look for or pay attention to in different players. I think that's really unique to have different perspectives. I think that's a great thing about baseball because baseball is probably the most objective sport in all sports. The greatest moment could happen in the next pitch or it could happen in the last pitch of the game. It really keeps you on the edge of your seat. And that's something I'll always cherish forever. So, wow, I got real deep there for a minute. But yeah, do you have any other final closings before we end this amazing live stream?
No, I think that we've pretty much covered it all.
I think so too. Well, then that will probably be it for this live podcast. Just remember, everyone, that we do live podcasts every Sunday night at 6 p.m. Eastern time. We love your comments, your likes. If you can just share to your family, your friends, anyone that is a baseball fanatic, even if you're just an average baseball fan, because this is what this is tailored to. We're not trying to go too far in depth with analytics, but we also want to be sure we can talk to the common baseball fan. And I think that's something we all can share together, is coming together as a community and enjoying baseball. All these things that happen, signings, players you never heard about. And it really is something to cherish. And it's something that Noah and I, we love. We've always loved the game of baseball. And, we're excited to give you the next 2 podcasts, when we talk about the NL West and the AL West, and then for the season to come. So we'd like to offer you just to hit the subscribe button, leave a like on the video if you guys like this. Seriously, it means a lot to us. This podcast will be live in the next coming days on all platforms: Apple Music, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, you name it, it's going to be there. And be sure to check out Noah's blogs. He writes about the Reds. He's very passionate about it. He's very good at writing. Very good insights, and you can find on his Twitter, which is listed right here on the video, at Noah_Gayhart. So be sure to do that. But until next time, we hope to see you next weekend. We hope you guys have a great week. Hopefully it'll be a good week for baseball, and we'll see you soon.